The other day, I went to an international meeting. It was fucking lovely, except for one guy. Everybody I talked to was fucking awesome, except this one lone fucking yahoo. And the meeting was on Bangladesh, on internationalism, and Vietnam. And towards the end, there was time for questions and answers, and this one guy stood up and asked,
Well, why doesn't Vietnam do more?
And the Vietnamese representative spoke on this, and they gave a really great answer. It was lovely. And then I added some additional context, and I was fucking furious, but I suppressed most of that. I put my feelings aside mostly, and I later got to give the guy some hostility, but at the time, I just gave the context, which is that the second the IMF reunified their country, they were hit with an IMF deal. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the IMF is the largest institution of neocolonialism in the world, and it is the biggest tool of the United States to destroy countries. Their loans are designed to bankrupt countries. They provide extremely high interest loans, and then when the country can't make the payments, they start taking the money and bankrupting the country and taking their natural resources. One example is Madagascar. Once Madagascar couldn't make their payments, the IMF took the budget from their mosquito eradication program, and 14,000 people died. 4,000 of them were children. And a more recent example was Ukraine. Russia was providing a $15 billion loan without terms and conditions to Ukraine. Then the United States overthrew Ukraine in 2014, gave them an IMF loan. And this IMF loan stipulated that the US-backed Ukrainian state needed to cut pensions and privatize their agricultural land. Then, as soon as that was signed, 3 Western corporations bought up 17 million acres of agricultural land. This is Cargill, DuPont, and Monsanto. And among those 3 corporations, one of them was one of the primary companies producing Agent Orange, which was shipped and used in Vietnam. So this guy's entire focus is attacking Vietnam instead of talking about the history, the circumstances that were affected on the people, and completely not talking about the imperialist devastation that went on, that those people are still suffering for, that this fucking yokel is safe from. So his frame of reference is, he's the type of dude who would critique a domestic violence victim for fighting back in self-defense. So I was really fucking mad, but I was very grateful to be able to share some context and share that even though Vietnam was hit with the IMF in 1975, the moment they reunified, they've still been able to make progress, and they have what they call bamboo diplomacy, which is a result from the trauma of surviving and winning 5 wars in a very short span of time. So with bamboo diplomacy, their focus is to not get pulled into any protracted struggles, to not end up in any wars, and to just focus on peace. The other thing I shared was that Vietnam is a really important country for us to look at and witness, because we don't see a lot of propaganda to do with Vietnam. And this is specific. We can look and see why. It's because Vietnam and its bamboo diplomacy and the IMF, which is why it is in that position, limits it from being able to uphold internationalism and apply Leninism as deeply as it could. So Vietnam isn't focused on exporting revolution, of healing everything. It's not focused on destroying the US. It's not focused on destroying NATO. It's not focused on upending the rules-based order of the United States as it exports its interests around the world. And Vietnam completed its revolution. It kicked out the imperialists, it kicked out the United States, and reunified the country. So we have that historic example. And we can look at that exact same example and apply it to Korea. Almost no Western people support Korea. So with this, we can look at the example of Vietnam having almost no propaganda used against it, and then we can look at which countries do have tons of propaganda used against it, which largely is Russia, Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, China, and Iran. I'll leave you with some sad facts, so you don't end up like a jackass like that fucking guy. In World War II, the United States were not the good guys. They were not anti-fascists. They were fighting explicitly so they could prevent the rival fascist powers from being able to dominate the world. It was about domination. It wasn't about saving the world, which is extremely transparent when you can see the amount of bombs they used. When they fought Vietnam and Cambodia, they used more bombs in that region than they used against the Nazis in World War II. In Vietnam, there was an estimated 35 million mines left over after the war. And in the recent trade deal, the US said they will work towards taking out many of these mines in exchange for Vietnam doing what is in their interest. Korea had roughly 20% of its population killed in the Korean War. Korea has been trying to reunify its country for more than 40 years. And when the French started losing, when they controlled Vietnam, they were getting shit kicked. The US actually subsidized French occupation of Vietnam. Also, years ago, people used to talk about left unity on this continent, but they didn't want a left unity. They wanted a colonial unity. If you have left unity, you are going to be in harmony with the internationalists of the world, which puts you at odds with everybody around us because their interests are completely different to ours. The people around us, their goal is assimilation. Their goal is to take care of themselves and only themselves. So this is the direct detriment to internationalism. And we can see it is a colonial unity that they are fighting for because they are in line with liberals. They're in line with imperialism. They are not in contrast to everybody around them, which is what happens when you're an internationalist. With a colonial unity, your heart will align with the liberals of this continent. As an internationalist, your heart will align, and the theory will align, with the marginalized peoples across the world and the victims of imperialism around the world. Love and solidarity, all power to the people.